The Essence of Mud. A monologue by Jean-Luc Malot, former king of Gnosis of Grasse, Grasse prison. Today, I did not ask him to forgive me. I knew that God was just, and that the sins of Salieri would be punished. Antonio Salieri in Amadeus by Peter Schaffer. 11 square meters. I have counted them. I count them still, every morning in the moment of silence before Farouk begins. Farouk is my cellmate, former kebab vendor, convicted for meat of unspecified origin. He considers himself an artist. Every morning he constructs something he calls golden risotto in an orange plastic plate. Beats the rhythm on the wash basin because he believes himself to be, in addition to a great chef, a techno DJ, and watches me with the expression of someone who cannot understand why I am not thrilled to be here with him, the chef/DJ. This morning, he asks whether I have lost someone. I look at him. I tell him to sit down. I tell him that my tragedy began with a leather handbag on the floor, and that someone had to die for that handbag. My atelier was in Grasse. Grasse, which reveals itself like a precious jewel set into the Provençal hinterland, perched on the hills that look down on Cannes from above. You should know, my small and mediocre companion in misfortune, that Grasse is the world capital of perfume. To walk through its historic center is to lose oneself in a labyrinth of picturesque squares and 18th century architecture where the air still carries the centuries-old tradition of flowers, tuberose, lavender, and rose. It is an elegance born from contradiction, the child of those medieval tanners who first began distilling essences to mask the stench of cured hides. But as I was saying, my atelier was white, absolute white, surgical white, the kind of white that hurts the eyes when you step in from the street. There was only one flaw, a hairline crack in the marble of the workbench on the left side, 0.5 millimeter wide. I saw it every morning while trying not to look at it. I looked at nothing else. That obscene, imperfect crack, like my anosmia, invisible to everyone, oppressive only to me. I smelled nothing, nothing at all. For 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. A virus. 4 weeks. My olfactory receptors burned away like a field of wheat, methodically, completely, without leaving roots. Acquired anosmia, probably permanent. Total silence where there should have been notes, chords, the chemical life of things. I was Salieri. I know it now with the clarity that comes only from staring at this wretched cell. Salieri, who studies every one of Mozart's scores to understand the mechanism of the miracle, who knows every rule of counterpoint and feels nothing of that grace which fell from above upon the boy from Salzburg, like light rain on a parched meadow. I had studied every molecule, every olfactory chord, and then a virus had taken from me the only thing that matters, not knowing, feeling, and I no longer felt anything. That morning there were 7 journalists. I took the vial, brought it to my nose, closed my eyes. Nothing. I opened my mouth and described for them the bergamot of Calabria, the iris of Florence, the white musk and grey amber. The words were true. They were made of years of study. only they corresponded to nothing that was actually in the vial. I had no way of knowing. The journalists left. Alone at last, I grabbed the flask of pure ammonia from the bench and drank a mouthful, hoping to feel at least the burning sensation. Pain would have been better than the void. Nothing. I scorched my nasal passages in a clinically verifiable way and felt not even that. Then the doorbell rang. They were the first guests. Marc Beaumont, wine producer, a vulgarity so total it became almost revolting, and Sophie, a writer, winner of the Prix Goncourt, a cognac-colored Hermès bag on her arm, and a smile as brazen as her stride. Sophie stepped into my atelier and stopped on the threshold. She said nothing for a few seconds. She turned her head toward the diffuser in the corner. Then she told me, in that flat voice of someone stating a known fact, that there was a dead note in my atelier, the synthetic molecule in the fixative of my latest line, that at certain concentrations in the heat it oxidized, that it smelled of burnt plastic, that it smelled of fiction. I smiled. She smiled. She brushed the vial on my workbench with one finger, the way one touches something already held, and she told me that tomorrow she would send the draft to her editor, that I was her final chapter. Sophie was Mozart. She possessed the grace of one who receives the gift without asking for it, without deserving it, without even noticing it. That grace which God distributes at random, and which Salieri watches from across the room, knowing that no technique, no discipline will ever be able to buy it. Marc asked where the bar was. I had 24 hours. The gala dinner, the guests, the wine, the perfect geometry of my salon. I sat at the head of the table. It was my home, my beautiful home. Sophie sat to my left and spoke well, with the ease of someone who has nothing to prove because she already knows she is right. She spoke of nearly extinct bergamots, of marine molecules, of how the human nose surpasses any gas chromatograph because it operates by association, not by measurement. And the bag was on the table. That cognac-colored Hermès bag, resting beside her glass as though it were the most natural thing in the world. It was a stain. Not in the metaphorical sense, in the visual, physical, immediate sense. That bag broke the perfect geometry of my crystal table, like an object fallen from another universe. I saw it and felt a stab in my chest. I could not stop seeing it. In Latin, invidere means literally to be unable to look. The presence of something that negates you to yourself. That is what that bag was to me. I stood up. I picked it up with 2 fingers only, the way one handles an infected specimen. The leather was warm, soft, alive. And that aliveness disgusted me with an intensity I cannot explain even today. Dead material pulsing with someone else's life. I let it drop. I did not set it down. I let it drop. From 30 centimeters. The cognac-colored hide struck the floor tile with a dull, vulgar, definitive sound, and in the moment the bag landed, down there, on the floor, low at my feet, I felt something that had nothing to do with perfume, a physical relief, dark, unspeakable. The symbol of Sophie's authenticity was in the dust. Finally at my feet, I looked away. I breathed. The table was perfect again. I told her, in the most velvet voice I possessed, that leather was an olfactory predator, that its volatile molecules contaminated the purity of the air, that we could not allow it. My jaw was clenched. I was performing the role of the magnanimous god to conceal the envious monster that deep within me, in the very viscera of my being, felt threatened. Sophie looked at me with the calm of someone who already knows how the story ends. She said that leather was the skin of something that had once been alive, that it is difficult to ignore life even when it makes noise. She raised her glass and toasted those who had lost the ability to feel life and had settled for feigning it. I smiled. No one understood, but I understood. I was the mouse and she the cat, and my only remaining move was to eliminate her before dawn. That night I went down to the basement. Before going down to the laboratory, I woke Chloe Arnaud, 36 years old, the true nose of the Maison Malot for 5 years. Every perfume that bore my name bore her hands, her memory, her talent. I signed. She stayed in the shadows. Well paid, naturally. Not enough, though. There is no enough for that kind of arrangement. A detail I had never stopped to consider at the time. The essence of mud. Sophie, I told her that somehow this writer had found out my secret, and I asked for her help. Chloe did not turn around at first. When she finally did, she had an expression I had never seen on her. Not fear, not compliance. Something colder, as though she were measuring something she had already measured many times, and was only waiting for the right moment to tell me. She told me Sophie had a rare allergy to T304, the synthetic molecule in the fixative. She was telling me only because she knew how my mind worked when I was frightened, and because she wanted me to know that she knew. Then she added something that I registered in that moment as secondary, but which was in fact the core of everything. She said, "Bear in mind that in the mobile laboratory next to the extractors there's still that failed blend from last month, batch 7, the blue dye with the industrial grade emetic, zero toxicity, guaranteed effect. I've kept it because I didn't know where to dispose of it." Then she turned back to her test tubes. Conversation over. I gave it no further thought. I had other things on my mind. It was a clumsy mistake, but narcissism works precisely this way. It makes you believe you have control over everything, including the people who have spent 5 years in the shadows feeding your lie. 28 square meters of industrial chemical laboratory, the exact opposite of the atelier, the belly of the beast. I concentrated the T304. I injected it into a bottle of vin Soir with a handwritten label, the way one does for the most exclusive gifts. A private justice without fingerprints, without noise, without blood. Salieri closing Mozart's score. While I worked, I noticed Chloe's batch 7 on the shelf, a plain bottle labeled in her small, precise handwriting. Waste. Emetic plus BLU03. Do not dispose of without authorization. I moved it aside to make room for my vials. Then I forgot about it entirely. Another mistake I made that night. But when one is desperate and mediocre at the same time, certain details seem irrelevant. The next day, Mark told me Sophie would be sending the draft of her manuscript to her editor in the morning, that I was her favorite chapter. And then he laughed. A coarse, braying laugh. Time had run out. I entered Sophie's room in the afternoon while she was in the garden. I placed the bottle on the welcome tray beside the chocolate and the rosewater. A gesture of hospitality, the most natural thing in the world. I heard footsteps. I hid in the wardrobe. Sophie came in. She walked to the bedside table. She picked up the bottle. Her thumb grazed the atomizer. I did not breathe. Then she put it down. She left the room. And I stayed in the wardrobe for another 3 minutes, in a darkness that should have smelled of life, and that for me was only chemical silence. The darkness enveloped my soul as well. That same evening came the closing party. The salon lit up, the creme of Grasse in their finest. I played the host. I smiled, I shook hands, I dispensed compliments like counterfeit currency. Sophie came down the stairs at 11:20, perfectly well. She leaned close to my ear and told me the perfume she had found in her room was wonderful. "One of my finest," she said, with that smile that was not a compliment. I waited 10 minutes, 20, half an hour. Sophie danced, laughed, discussed wines with the Japanese distributors. Nothing. No collapse. No anaphylaxis. Sweat ran down my back. I had to act. Quickly. On some pretext, I drew her aside, into the winter garden. The greenhouse pressed against the west wing. Rare orchids, an air conditioning system I had prepared 2 hours earlier. Sophie followed me with that half-smile of someone who already knows the script. I asked whether she had truly liked the perfume. She told me she had never sprayed it, that she always carried a portable chromatography kit when doing research, that she had analyzed the bottle, T304, 12 times the normal concentration, that she knew about my anosmia, that the oxidized note in the atelier the day before was unequivocal. "Beautiful mask," she said. "Pity it was also my prison." And then she went pale, her hand rising to her throat. I told her the poison was not in the bottle. It was in the air conditioning system, in the very air she was breathing at that moment. A slow diffusion release, timed. The concentration in the air of that winter garden was precisely sufficient. And I smiled. Sophie sank among the orchids, slowly, without drama, her cheek coming to rest against the rim of a pot of white phalaenopsis. I watched her with a coldness I had not known I possessed. Her indecent smile still printed on her suffering face, a crime of the elite to protect a brand, my life. She did not deserve her talent. I did not deserve her presence. I was Salieri closing Mozart's score. With the last deliberate movement left to her, Sophie tore a small white flower from a pot in the corner and slipped it into her pocket with an obstinate precision that was almost irritating. Like Mozart hiding a note in a score he knows he will not be able to finish. The screaming came from a housemaid. I was already in the salon. I told her about Sophie. 60 years old, a grey flannel jacket that had survived 3 governments, a smell, I was told, of fried garlic and gitanes smoke. He entered a room the way an uncomfortable object does, silent, out of place, impossible to ignore. My guests regarded him with the discreet horror the elite reserves for everything that has not been chosen. He looked around. He nodded. Then he looked at me and said it was odd. No smell of death, only the smell of chemicals. The interrogations began. Mark asked whether he could call his broker. The notary's wife from Marseille complained that the body had ruined the feng shui of the evening. Sophie's death was, for those present, above all a question of unfortunate timing. Inspector Renaud rose from his chair, walked toward me, and pulled from his jacket pocket the crushed flower, the one Sophie had slipped into her pocket as she died. He rubbed it between thumb and forefinger. He held it under my nose. He asked what flower it was. Around me, everyone stopped talking. Silence fell. There it was, the moment. The king of noses cannot not know what flower a flower is. You cannot step down from the throne whenever you like. I said it was a bud of damask rose, herbaceous opening note, floral heart, undertone of oak moss, the Provençal variety, dawn crystallized in a petal. The inspector told me it was wild horseradish, Amoracea rusticana, that it grew as a weed along the edges of the driveway, that it smelled of rotting cabbage, that anyone who had ever kept a garden would know it. Someone in the room laughed. Then the inspector took out his phone and showed me the email Sophie had sent him the night before at 11:47, the draft of her chapter. My medical records attached. 3 years of research. And at the bottom of the email, the final detail. The T304 at that concentration, reacting with the humidifier, left an oxidation byproduct on fabrics, a smell of sulfur and ammonia, highly persistent. My clothes, the ones I was wearing at that very moment, were saturated with it. The inspector could smell it perfectly. Everyone present could smell it. Everyone. Except me. Mark lowered his glass. The woman with the earrings took a step back, and I, Jean-Luc Malot, the king of noses of Grasse, did the only thing my trampled dignity would allow. I walked to the laboratory table, seized a vial, and declared that they would never have the honor of caging a genius, that Salieri dies in his cell and is forgotten, that Mozart survives in his music, that I would survive in the air. Then I drank it down in a single draught, and I waited for the glorious death. Nothing. Then I felt something in my stomach that was not death. Chloe, as I later discovered, had emptied and replaced every real poison in the mobile laboratory 3 days before my final downfall. Not to save my life. She was at pains to clarify this to the detective in her flat chemist's voice. She had done it because she was disgusted. By my narcissism, by my cowardice, by 5 years spent in the shadows, feeding my lie. She had taken batch 7, that waste product she had mentioned that night, the blue dye with the industrial-grade emetic, the one I had moved aside without a second thought to make room for my vials, and used it to replace every poison in the mobile laboratory, one by one, calmly with the precision of a chemist. It was she who had been in control all along, not I. I vomited blue liquid continuously onto the Carrara marble floor of my atelier. In front of the creme of Grasse society, the police officers, the Japanese distributors with their smartphones, in front of Mark, laughing so hard he knocked over his glass. In front of Chloe, who watched me with the expression of someone who has finally returned something to someone who deserved it. The blue covered the crack in the marble. The blue covered the white mask. And I was no longer the most celebrated nose in Grasse, no longer a legend. I had become a meme. Sophie's bag was still on the floor of the salon where I had placed it that first evening, as though it were waiting for something, as though it had always known it would win. There it is, Farouk. The whole story. My sense of smell returned 4 months ago, slowly, like the sun returning after an eclipse. The mold on the walls, Farouk's €3 cologne, the damp air from the barred window. The first thing I smelled with absolute clarity was Farouk's golden risotto, stale bread, mineral water, heated polyethylene. I do not know whether a more precise torture exists. 3 years of sensory void, and the first thing the world gives back to you is the golden risotto of a convicted former kebab vendor. This is the true despair, not the blue liquid, not the viral video. It is that my nose has returned here in 11 square meters of cell, too late for anything useful. I am Salieri in the final scene of the film. Alive, survived, ridiculous with 30 more years ahead of me of smells. I did not choose to encounter him. Farouk lifts the lid of his orange plate. A warm wave hits me in the face. Soaked bread, stale water. Something proteinous I have no wish to identify. I begin to scream.
Le rideau tombe enfin sur mon 11 mètres carrés. Farouk le DJ des rêves.